Fitch Waerie. Frank was completely vexed as he pulled into the secluded driveway after a 3-hour and 45-minute drive. It was a hot summer day, and the air felt like his grandmother's kitchen on a day she was canning green beans. And he dreaded getting out of the car, so he decided to wait in the nice cold air conditioning until the prospects arrived. Frank despised his humble upbringing and had become a bitter and ungrateful man who cared for no one or nothing except making lots and lots of money so he could have all the finer things in life. He glanced at his Rolex and said, "If these two aren't here in 5 minutes, I'm leaving and billing them for my time wasted." Just as he finished the sentence with a smirk, he observed a blue compact car that was not luxurious in any shape or form, pulling in the driveway behind his black Mercedes that was very sharp, with tinted windows, black powder coat wheels, chrome trim, and door handles. Pulling in behind the black Mercedes in a blue Ford Focus was Azilphia and her best friend / business partner, Rishta. As Azilphia put the car in park, she and Rishta looked at each other and at the same time said, "No way." Then Rishta said, "I guess the jerk from the gas station that later cut us off on the interstate is our real estate agent." Oh, Lord, this should be interesting, thought Azilphia, who knew her friend typically spoke her mind about things that weren't pleasing to her. "Take some deep breaths, Rishta," whispered Azilphia, taking some deep breaths herself. He waited until they got out before turning off his car and stepping out into the not-so-great, in his opinion, outdoors. He sneered as he watched the two women approaching. The short red-headed woman was pointing out trees and plants in sheer excitement, which he found completely ridiculous, while the taller blonde woman walked alongside, carefully watching where she stepped. As the ladies approached, the peppy one was smiling warmly from ear to ear, with her hand extended for a handshake, and introduced herself. "Hello, I'm Azilphia Gibbs, and this is my business partner, who happens to be my best friend, Rishta Bridges." Frank smirked and said, "I am Frank Boothby. You may refer to me as Mr. Boothby." "Of course, Mr. Boothby. It's nice to meet you," replied Azilphia, with her hand still extended. "Shall we?" Frank inquired, unimpressed. "Lead the way," motioned Rishta as she rolled her eyes. Frank was a complete and total jerk, but he was very intelligent and always did his research on any property he was selling. As they started up the driveway that weren't much more than a trail, Frank began to tell the ladies the history of the area. Laurel Bloomery was settled in the early 19th century, and the first Bloomery forge mill was built and began operations in 1810. The mill was in operation for 60 years, then closed in 1870, Frank stated. "This area is known for its majestic mountains and sequestered valleys," he said, almost gasping for breath as they topped the hill. Azilphia looked with wonder at the valley before them. While Rishta was catching her breath, she pinched Azilphia and said, "Girl, what did I let you get me into this time?" They both laughed while Frank rolled his eyes. Frank Riley stated, "As you can see, there is a creek and a barn." Azilphia, once again excited by all the possibilities, and maybe just a smidge of curiosity, looked at Rishta and said, "Let's go check it out." The trio sat down into the valley. Frank only went because he didn't particularly care for the outdoors and thought if some wild animal came along, it would be better for him to be with these two so he would have a better chance of escaping, and his car was blocked in by theirs. As they got closer, they could hear the creek babbling and bubbling over the rocks, and they began to see that the barn was a lot bigger than it appeared from the top of the hill. As they got about a stone's throw from the barn, a gust of very cold wind blew across the valley and blew open one side of the big double doors of the barn. A feeling of uneasiness accompanied by that churning in the stomach simultaneously came over the trio as they stood looking in the barn door. Just as they were about to take a step to go inside the barn, out flew the biggest owl any of them had ever seen. Rishta and Azilphia screamed, interlocking elbows, then giggled because they just got scared by an owl. Frank had jumped and turned around, about to take off back up the hill, but he regained his composure quickly and started in the door to get in from the strangely cold wind. Just as they stepped through the door, another gust of cold wind slammed the door shut. Rishta and Frank grabbed their phones and turned on their flashlights. The barn was pretty big and open as far as they could see by the slivers of sunlight shining through the boards. There was a small sawmill along the right side with a few piles of lumber stacked neatly at the end. On the left side was an area with a variety of tools and implements and a few horse stalls. There was a loft running parallel on both sides, and at the end of the ground level was a ladder going up to the loft. "This barn is amazing," Azilphia chattered. "I'm going to check out the loft." She took 2 steps towards the ladder and froze. "What is—" Rishta began, but couldn't finish as they all stood there watching as this mysterious being trickled down from the loft, like blood from your arm when you've gotten into a thorny blackberry patch. Her hair was very long, and one side was as black as the raven, and the other side as a vivid red, just like a fox. Her hair fell around her waist as her feet touched the dirt floor of the barn. She lifted her head and opened her mesmerizing eyes. One of her eyes was like the sun shimmering on the surface of a river, and the other was a deep, dark, almost black green, like the evergreens that cover the mountains. She was beautiful and terrifying in the same breath. "Ma'am, are you—" Azilphia tried to ask, but was silenced when the being spoke. "I am whatever you perceive me to be. But aside from your human perception, I am the FitchWaerie. And the 3 of you are here because you ignored your intuition, and for that you will learn the consequences. One of you must die, or all of you will die. One of you must die so the other 2 can go, but you will not go free. The 2 will remember this day every day for the rest of your lives. So who will let the other 2 live?" asked the FitchWaerie. Azilphia bowed her head and closed her eyes and whispered, "I will die so that Rishta and Mr. Boothby can live." "So you want to take the easy way out?" asked the FitchWaerie. "No, I want Rishta to live and have the best life possible. And quite frankly, even though Mr. Boothby is a jerk, I wouldn't want him to die either," Azilphia said. "Do either of you want to trade places with Azilphia?" asked the FitchWaerie. Only silence was felt. "As you have spoken, so it shall be," stated the FitchWaerie. "Azilphia, what is your favorite bird?" the FitchWaerie asked. "The ruby-throated hummingbird," she replied. "That is what you shall be until the owl devours you." The FitchWaerie snapped her fingers, and immediately Azilphia was transformed into a hummingbird. She flew over to Rishta and landed on her outstretched hand, and Rishta gently stroked her head as tears streamed down her face. Then Azilphia flew out the now open door. "Now for you 2, FitchWaerie peered into their souls, and then turned to Rishta and said, "You may go. You will always remember this day, and will be reminded every time you see a hummingbird." Rishta slowly turned and stumbled out the door with great sadness, where Azilphia was hovering nearby. She said goodbye to her dear friend and started up the hill to go back to the car and leave this sad, sequestered valley for good. Meanwhile, back in the barn, the FitchWaerie closed in on Frank. "Ah, poor Mr. Boothby. I'm not poor," he shouted. "Not in reference to your financial status, but you are poor in other aspects of your life," FitchWaerie replied. "For you, I have decided to let you keep your riches. However, every day for the rest of your life, you will have some misfortune. A flat tire, a hole in your sock, the air conditioner in your precious car will not work in the summer, and the heat will not work in the winter. All the things that can possibly go wrong will. Indeed, you will live a long and miserable life," the FitchWaerie whispered in his ear, and then vanished. Frank closed his eyes and shook his head, then opened his eyes and said, "This isn't real." He turned to go out the door, and when he pushed on the door, he got a splinter in his hand. And then the door flung open, and he fell flat on his face. He lifted his head and looked around, and there was no one. He got up, dusted himself off, and made the trek back to his car, only to find the key in the ignition and the doors locked.